Graham Voss didn't just call me trash. He served the insult between the second and third course, loud enough for every donor at the table to hear. He waited for me to cry, to prove I was exactly the fragile liability he claimed I was, but I didn't shatter. I simply folded my napkin, looked him in the eye, and realized I didn't want an apology. I wanted his signature on a deed of sale. The elevator doors slid open with a hush that sounded like money. It was not the loud, clattering noise of the subway turnstiles I had grown up with in the city center, nor was it the aggressive buzz of the intercom at my parents' old walk-up. It was a soft, pneumatic exhale that announced I had arrived. I stepped out onto the 42nd floor of Glasslight Tower, the soles of my heels clicking against the polished Italian marble of the private foyer. I stood there for a long moment. I did not unlock the door immediately. I just breathed in the scent of the building, which was a mixture of white tea, ozone, and absolute silence. I held the key fob in my hand, feeling the weight of the smooth black plastic against my palm. This was mine. For the first time in 33 years, I owned a piece of the sky. The closing had finished 3 hours ago. I had sat across a mahogany table from a notary and a bank representative, signing my name over and over again until my hand cramped. The purchase price was $2,400,000. I had written the down payment check from an account that bore only my name. There were no co-signers, there were no silent partners, and most importantly, there were no parents listed as beneficiaries or trustees. I unlocked the heavy oak door and pushed it open. The penthouse was expansive, bathed in the golden hour light of late afternoon. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the entirety of Crestfall Harbor, the water turning a deep, bruised purple as the sun dipped low. I walked to the center of the living room, the space completely empty save for a single bottle of champagne I had brought with me. My phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it. I knew who it was, or at least, I feared who it was. My parents had an uncanny radar for when I had accumulated something of value. Throughout my 20s. Every promotion at Kestrel and Company Creative was met not with congratulations, but with a calculation. When I made senior partner, my father had asked if that meant I could finally co-sign a loan for his construction business. When I received my first six-figure bonus, my mother had sent me a listing for a timeshare in Florida, suggesting it would be a good investment for the family. They viewed my success as a natural resource. I was an oil field they had discovered, and they felt entitled to the drilling rights because they had raised me. But they did not know about this apartment. Not yet. I spent the next 2 hours walking the perimeter of the space. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a chef's kitchen with an island large enough to land a small aircraft. I ran my hand over the quartz countertops, telling myself that I was allowed to have this. I was allowed to have a door that locked. I was allowed to have a guest room that remained empty. By 7 in the evening, my guests began to arrive. It was a small group, deliberately curated. I had invited 4 people. There was Sarah, my mentor at the agency who had taught me how to negotiate with sharks without bleeding. There was David, the art director who had been my work husband for 5 years. And there were Elena and Mark, a couple I had known since college who understood the concept of boundaries. I buzzed them up. When Sarah walked in, she stopped dead in the entryway, dropping her purse to the floor. "Hazel," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the unfurnished room. "You actually did it." I handed her a plastic flute of champagne. I did. She walked over to the window, looking out at the city lights flickering to life below us. "You know they are going to hate this," she said, not looking at me. I joined her at the glass. "I know. That is why they are not here." We sat on the floor of the living room, eating takeout sushi from the expensive place down the street, drinking champagne that cost more than my weekly grocery budget used to be. The conversation was light, easy. We talked about the layout, about where the sofa should go, about the absurdity of the heated floors in the master bathroom. For 4 hours, I felt like a normal person. I felt like a woman who had worked 80-hour weeks for a decade and was finally resting in the fruit of her labor. There was no guilt. There was no obligation. There was no one asking me to pay a bill they had forgotten or to cover a debt they had hidden. David raised his glass for a toast around midnight. To Hazel Ross, he said, the only person I know who can sell ice to a polar bear, and finally bought herself a glacier. We clinked glasses. The sound was bright and final. When they left, the silence returned, but it felt friendlier now. It was filled with the memory of laughter. I slept on an air mattress in the master bedroom that night, staring up at the ceiling, feeling safe. The peace lasted exactly 8 hours. My phone rang at 8 in the morning. The screen displayed the name, Mother. I stared at it, the old knot tightening in my stomach. I had not told them the address. I had not told them the closing date, but somehow, the vibration of the phone felt like they were already inside the room. I answered, "Hello, Mom, Hazel, honey." Her voice was shrill, coded in that sugary performative affection she used when she wanted information. "We heard the wonderful news. Aunt Linda saw your post on social media about the view. Why didn't you call us?" I closed my eyes. I had posted a single photo of the sunset, tagged only as Crestfall Harbor. I had not mentioned the building. Aunt Linda was a digital bloodhound. "I was going to call you today." I lied. "I just got the keys yesterday. It has been a whirlwind." "Oh, I bet it has. I bet it has." "So, tell me everything. How many bedrooms?" "3, I said, keeping my voice neutral. "3. Her gasp was theatrical. "3 bedrooms for one girl? That seems like an awful lot of dusting. Hazel, what about the square footage? Is it bigger than your cousin Mike's place?" "It is comfortable." "Mom, and a guest suite? Is there a proper guest suite? There is a second bedroom." "Yes." "Well, that is just fantastic. Just fantastic. Your father is so proud. He was just saying the other day how worried he was about you living in the city alone. But if you have a guest suite, that changes things. What is the monthly carrying cost on a place like that? The HOA fees in those glass towers are criminal. I felt the wall go up. The data mining had begun. She wasn't asking to celebrate. She was asking to appraise the asset. "I can handle it. Mom, I have to run to a meeting. I will call you later in the week." I hung up before she could ask the price. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I stood in the middle of my $3 million sanctuary and felt like a naughty child who was hiding candy. I went to work. The agency was busy, which was a mercy. I buried myself in a campaign launch for a new tech client, letting the noise of the office drown out the conversation with my mother. I was reviewing copy for a billboard when the receptionist messaged me. "Your sister is here. She says it is an emergency." I froze. Brenna. My younger sister was 27 years old, but she moved through the world with the chaotic energy of a teenager. She was beautiful, undeniably so, with the kind of wide-eyed vulnerability that made people want to save her. I knew better. I had spent my entire life saving her, only to watch her throw herself back into the fire because she liked the warmth. I walked out to the lobby. Brenna was standing by the ficus tree, wearing a coat that was too thin for the season and clutching a duffel bag. Her mascara was smeared beneath her eyes in perfect, tragic streaks. "Hazel." She choked out when she saw me. She didn't wait for a greeting. She rushed forward and wrapped her arms around me, burying her face in my blazer. I stood stiffly, patting her back. The receptionist pretended to type. "Come to my office," I said quietly. I led her back, closing the glass door and pulling the blinds. Brenna sank into the guest chair, weeping. "He kicked me out," she sobbed. "Todd kicked me out. He said I was crazy. Hazel, he said I was dragging him down. I have nowhere to go. I can't go to Mom and Dad's. You know how Dad gets when I mess up." I leaned against my desk, crossing my arms. I did know. Dad would lecture her for hours, then borrow money from me to fix whatever mess she had made, then blame me for not watching her closely enough. "What happened?" "Brenna?" I asked. "Todd doesn't seem like the type to just kick you out without a reason." "He found some texts," she said, waving her hand vaguely. "It was nothing. Just me talking to an old friend. He blew it all out of proportion. He put my bags on the sidewalk. Hazel, I have been sitting in a coffee shop for 4 hours." She looked up at me. her eyes shimmering with tears. "I just need a safe place for a little while. Just until I get back on my feet. Please, Hazel, you are the only one who understands." I looked at her. I saw the manipulation, the practiced helplessness, but I also saw my sister. I saw the girl I used to share a bunk bed with, and I thought of the empty guest room in my new apartment, the room I had defended to my mother just that morning. 2 weeks, I said. Brenna stopped crying instantly. "Really? 2 weeks, Brenna. And there are rules. Anything," she said, wiping her face. "I will do anything." I held up a finger. "Rule 1, no extra keys. You get 1 fob, and if you lose it, you move out. Rule 2, no visitors. Not Todd, not an old friend, not a pizza delivery guy coming up to the unit. You meet them in the lobby. Rule 3, we set a move-out date today. In writing." She nodded eagerly, too eagerly. "Of course. I just need a place to sleep. I will be a ghost. You won't even know I'm there." I sighed. I knew I was making a mistake. The ink on my deed wasn't even dry, and already the family was seeping in through the cracks. But I couldn't send her to a shelter, and I couldn't send her to our parents. "Get your bag," I said. That evening was a study in invasion. I brought Brenna to Glasslight Tower. I watched her reaction as we walked through the lobby. Most people looked at the architecture, the vaulted ceilings, the modern art. Brenna looked at the security desk. She stared at the concierge for a beat too long. We rode the elevator in silence. When I opened the door to the penthouse, Brenna didn't gasp at the view like Sarah had. She didn't comment on the light. She walked straight to the video intercom panel on the wall. "Is this connected to the front desk?" she asked. "Yes," I said, putting my keys in the bowl. "It shows who is downstairs." "Does it record?" she asked, tapping the screen. "I think so." "Why?" She shrugged, turning away from it. "Just curious. It is very high-tech." I showed her the guest room. It was unfurnished, save for the air mattress I had slept on the night before and a pile of clean linens. "It is perfect," she said. I ordered dinner. Thai food. We ate at the kitchen island. Brenna was manic, her mood swinging from despair over Todd to a strange, hyper-alert excitement about the apartment. "So, the elevator requires a fob for every floor?" she asked, pushing a piece of tofu around her plate. "Yes," I said. "It is a secure building. And the stairs? Can anyone come up the stairs?" "No. The stairwell doors are locked from the outside. You can only exit, not enter." She nodded, as if filing this away. "That is good. That is really safe." "Brenna," I asked, putting my fork down, "is there something you are not telling me? Is Todd dangerous?" She laughed. A sharp, brittle sound. "Todd? No. Todd is a golden retriever. He is not dangerous. I just like knowing the layout. You can never be too careful, right?" Later that night, I woke up for a glass of water. The penthouse was dark. I walked into the living room and froze. Brenna was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window. But she wasn't looking out at the city. She was looking at the reflection of the room in the glass. She was holding her phone up, panning it slowly across the ceiling, then down to the floor vents. "Brenna?" I said. She jumped, nearly dropping the phone. "Hazel, you scared me. What are you doing?" I was just taking a video for my Instagram story," she said quickly, "showing off my big sister's success. Goals, right?" I frowned. At 3 a.m? I couldn't sleep. The bed it is an air mattress, you know? "Go back to sleep. Brenna," I said, my voice hard. "And do not post this place on social media. I mean it. I want privacy." She pocketed her phone. "Sure. Sorry. Good night. Hazel." She scurried back to the guest room. I stood there, looking at the spot where she had been standing. She hadn't been taking a video for Instagram. The angle was wrong. She had been filming the motion sensors in the corner of the room. The next morning, I left Brenna sleeping and went down to the lobby to grab a coffee from the cafe attached to the building. As I was waiting for the elevator, a woman in a sharp gray suit stepped up beside me. I recognized her. Maris Holt. She lived in the penthouse across the hall. Unit 42A. She was a corporate litigator, terrifyingly smart and ice cold. We had met briefly at the closing. Hazel Ross, right? She said, not looking at me. Yes. Hi. Maris. She adjusted the silk scarf at her neck. You might want to have a word with the front desk security. My stomach dropped. Why? Did my sister do something? Not your sister, she said. She turned to face me, her eyes dark and serious. A man was here yesterday evening. Before you came home with the girl, he was asking the concierge about Unit 42B. Specifically, I felt a chill run down my spine. What man? Maris shrugged. Older, heavy-set, expensive suit, but it looked like he slept in it. He asked if the owner had moved in yet. He asked if the deed was under a trust or a personal name. What did the concierge say? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He told him to leave. Obviously, this is a private building, but the man left an envelope. Maris pressed the elevator button. The concierge put it in your mailbox. But I thought you should know. People like that do not usually show up unless they think they own the place. I thanked her, my hands trembling. I waited for her to get on the elevator. Then I turned and walked to the mailroom. My box was number 42B. I opened it. It was empty. Except for a single plain white envelope. There was no stamp, no return address, just my name. Hazel, written in block letters. The handwriting was familiar. It was jagged, forceful. I ripped it open. Inside was a single sheet of yellow legal pad paper. The note was short. Family should live together again. Don't make this difficult. There was no signature, but I didn't need one. I stared at the note, the fluorescent lights of the mailroom humming above me. It wasn't Todd. It wasn't a stranger. I thought of Brenna filming the sensors. I thought of my mother asking about the square footage. I thought of my father's silence. They weren't just happy for me. They were coming for me. I crumpled the note in my hand, the paper biting into my palm. I walked toward the elevator, my heels clicking on the marble, sounding like a countdown. I had bought a fortress to keep them out, but I had made a tactical error. I had let one of them inside the gate. I pressed the button for the 42nd floor. I was going to evict my sister, and then I was going to change the locks. But as the elevator rose, I had a sinking feeling that locks wouldn't be enough. Not for this family. The dashboard screenshot from the anonymous email was a blurry, low-resolution mess, but to a strategy consultant, it was a crime scene photo. I sat at my dining room table, the mahogany surface cold against my forearms, and stared at the glowing pixels until my eyes burned. The timestamp in the corner was 3 days old. The header read, Consolidated Cash Flow, Internal Eyes Only. Ethan was asleep in the master bedroom. He had come home from the dinner pale and silent, collapsing into bed with the heavy, unearned exhaustion of a man who has spent his life trying to hold up a ceiling that was designed to crush him. I did not sleep. I had a bottle of sparkling water and a spreadsheet open on my laptop. I started with the public filings. Voss Meridian Holdings was a publicly traded giant, which meant they had to file quarterly reports with the Securities and Exchange Commission. I pulled the last 4 10K forms and lined them up against the blurry numbers in the screenshot. On the surface, the company looked healthy. Revenue was up 4%. EBITDA was stable. Graham Voss appeared on the front page of the annual report, smiling like a benevolent shark in a bespoke suit, standing in front of a factory line that looked too clean to be real. But when I dug into the operating expenses, the math started to drift. I found a line item labeled Strategic Advisory and Logistics. It had ballooned by 40% in the last 2 quarters. In a company the size of Meridian, that was millions of dollars bleeding out of the main artery. I cross-referenced the vendors listed in the footnotes of the more obscure filings. 3 names kept appearing: North Point Logistics, Gray Harbor Consulting, Orchard, and Slate. I ran a search on their registered addresses. North Point was registered to a mailbox in a strip mall in Delaware. Gray Harbor listed a suite in a building that had been demolished 6 months ago, and Orchard and Slate shared an address with a residential home in a suburb 2 hours away. I pulled up the invoices attached to the filings. They were sloppy. The font on the North Point invoice was identical to the font on the Gray Harbor invoice. The formatting of the dates was the same. The invoice numbers were sequential, even though they were supposedly from different companies. Someone was siphoning money out of Voss Meridian, and they were doing it with the arrogance of someone who knew no one would dare to look. I closed my laptop as the sun began to bleed gray light into the room. I was not just angry anymore, I was terrified. Graham had called me trash to humiliate me, but I realized now that it was a distraction. He was a magician waving a red handkerchief with one hand, while the other hand picked the pocket of his own legacy. 2 days later, I walked into the Lion's Den. It was the annual Voss Meridian Family Tour Day, an event designed to parade the employees and their families through the headquarters in Harbor Gate. It was performative corporate theater at its finest. There were balloons in the company colors of navy and silver. There were catered lunchboxes. There were banners that read, "One team, one future." I attended as Ethan's dutiful wife. I wore a cream-colored dress that was expensive enough to fit in, but simple enough to be ignored. Ethan stayed close to my side, his hand gripping my elbow a little too tightly. He was trying to act like everything was normal, like his father hadn't verbally eviscerated me 72 hours prior. Graham was holding court in the atrium, shaking hands with factory foremen and laughing with administrative assistants. He looked the part of the industrial titan. He saw us enter. His eyes flicked to mine, cold and dead, before his face broke into a wide, practiced smile. "Ethan," he boomed, "and Lila, so glad you could make it. No hard feelings about the other night. I hope we are all passionate people here." I smiled back. It felt like baring my teeth. "Of course not. Graham, it was an educational evening." He clapped Ethan on the shoulder. "That is the spirit. Go mingle. Show her the empire. Son?" We walked through the open-plan finance department. The air conditioning was humming too loudly, covering the lack of conversation. I knew what a happy office sounded like. It sounded like phones ringing, keyboards clacking, and people shouting over partitions. This room was silent. People were working with their heads down, shoulders hunched. I excused myself to go to the restroom. Inside, the silence was even heavier. A woman was washing her hands at the sink. She looked to be about my age, wearing a blazer that had seen better days and glasses that kept sliding down her nose. She was scrubbing her hands aggressively, the water running hot. She looked at me in the mirror. Her eyes widened. "You are the daughter-in-law." I nodded. "I am Lila." She turned off the tap and dried her hands with a paper towel, her movements jerky and nervous. "I am Naomi Reddick, manager of accounts payable. Nice to meet you." "Naomi." She looked at the door, then back at me. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You should tell him to stop smiling." "Excuse me?" "Your husband," she said, leaning in slightly. "He is walking around out there smiling like he owns the place. It makes people nervous. We all know the layoffs are coming on Monday." I froze. "Layoffs?" "The annual report said you were hiring." Naomi let out a short, bitter laugh. "The annual report says a lot of things. Look, I shouldn't be talking to you, but I saw what happened at the dinner, the waiter's talk." She adjusted her glasses, her eyes darting to the door again. "If you are as smart as they say you are, look at the reconciliations for the Western Division. Some numbers do not reconcile because they are not meant to." Before I could ask another question, the door opened and 2 women from HR walked in. Laughing loudly about the catering, Naomi flinched, threw her paper towel in the trash, and walked out without looking back. I rejoined Ethan, my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs. I looked at the employees differently now. I saw the fear in their eyes when Graham walked past. I saw the way they stopped talking when a manager approached. This was not a growing company. This was a ship taking on water, and the captain was locking the passengers in the hold. That night, Ethan went to see his father. I begged him not to go. I told him Graham was dangerous. I told him about the invoices, about the fake vendors. I told him what Naomi had said. Ethan wouldn't listen. He was desperate for resolution. He wanted to believe that the dinner was just a misunderstanding, a bad mood, a momentary lapse. He wanted his father to love him more than he wanted the truth. He came back 2 hours later, He looked like he had been in a physical fight. He walked into the living room and sat on the sofa, staring at the blank television screen. "What happened?" I asked, sitting beside him. "He says he was protecting me," Ethan said, his voice hollow. "He said, 'You are a gold digger, Lila.' He said you are trying to turn me against my family so you can get a settlement. He told you that?" Ethan nodded. "He said the insult was a test, to see if you had thick skin, and you failed because you left. And now you are poisoning me with these conspiracy theories about invoices." I felt a surge of rage so pure it nearly blinded me. It was classic gaslighting. Graham had taken his own abuse and reframed it as my failure. "Do you believe him?" I asked. Ethan looked at me. His eyes were wet. "I do not know what to believe. He is my father. Lila. He built everything we have. Why would he destroy it?" "Because he is greedy," I said, "and because he thinks he is untouchable." Ethan stood up. "Stop it. Just stop it. I cannot hear this anymore." He went to the guest bedroom and closed the door. I heard the lock click. It was the first time in 3 years of marriage that we had slept in separate rooms. The next day, I received a call from Celeste Voss, Ethan's mother. She asked to meet for tea at a hotel downtown, neutral ground. When I arrived, she was sitting in a high-backed velvet chair, looking like a porcelain doll that had been glued back together too many times. Her hands were shaking as she lifted her cup. "Sit down, Lila," she said softly. I sat. "Celeste, if this is about Graham—" "It is not about Graham," she interrupted. "It is about you." She set the cup down. "You are fighting a war you do not understand. I saw the look on your face at the dinner. You have pride. That is dangerous in this family. I am not going to let him treat me like that." I said. Celeste smiled, a sad, thinning expression. "I was like you once. I had opinions. I had a degree. But Graham does not want a partner. He wants an audience. I survived by becoming useful and quiet. If you want to stay with Ethan, you will have to learn to do the same." I looked at this woman, draped in silk and diamonds, and saw the wreckage of a human spirit. "I love Ethan," I said, "but I will not become you." Celeste looked away, staring out the window at the rain. "Then I suggest you check the mail more carefully," she said cryptically. "Sometimes things get sent to the wrong address, especially when names are so similar." She stood up, placed a $100 bill on the table, and left. I went home and went through the pile of mail that had accumulated on the console table. Most of it was junk, but near the bottom, buried under a catalog, was a letter from the state tax authority. It was addressed to E. Voss Strategic LLC. My husband's name was Ethan Voss, but he didn't have an LLC. I opened it. It was a notice of overdue filing fees for an entity formed 6 months ago. The registered agent was listed as Ethan Voss. The signature at the bottom of the formation document was a scrawl that looked like Ethan's, but the loop of the V was wrong. My blood ran cold. I went into my home office and logged into a background check service I used for corporate due diligence. I ran the entity name, E. Voss Strategic LLC. It wasn't just a shell company, it was a guarantor. 3 weeks ago, this entity had signed a guarantee for a $5 million bridge loan from a high-risk lender. The collateral listed was Ethan's personal future equity in Voss Meridian. Ethan didn't know about this. I knew he didn't. He checked his bank balance before buying a new watch. He would never sign a $5 million guarantee. Someone had forged his signature. Someone was using his identity to shield themselves from debt. I picked up the phone. I needed a lawyer, and not the one Voss Meridian used. I met Mara Klein in a coffee shop 3 towns over. She was a corporate shark who specialized in executive disputes. I told her I needed help with a prenuptial cleanup, just to get the meeting. But once we were seated, I slid the tax notice across the table. "This is not a prenup issue," Mara said, adjusting her glasses. She looked at the document for 10 seconds. "This is fraud. Can you prove it?" I asked. Mara tapped the paper. "If your husband didn't sign this, then someone is setting him up as a fall guy. This LLC is designed to hold toxic debt. If the debt defaults, The creditors come after the LLC, they come after Ethan. Whoever set this up is building a blast wall, and they are using your husband as the bricks. Graham, I whispered. Mara looked at me. If it is the father, you are in a very dangerous position. He is not just stealing from the company. He is stealing his son's future to cover his tracks. You need hard proof, financial proof. I knew who had it. I sent a text to Naomi Reddick. I know about the Western Division. Meet me at Union Station, Platform 4. 6 p.m. She didn't reply. But at 6 o'clock, I stood near the ticket kiosk at the busiest commuter station in the city. The air smelled of diesel and wet wool. Thousands of people rushed past. A river of gray coats. I saw her standing near a trash can, looking terrified. She was wearing a hat pulled low. I walked up to her. Naomi. She jumped. You are crazy, she hissed. If they see me talking to you, they won't. I said, Naomi, I found an LLC in Ethan's name. Graham is forging signatures. He is taking out loans in his son's name. Naomi's face went white. Oh God, tell me about the covenant. I said, you mentioned the numbers don't reconcile. Why? Naomi looked around wildly. Then she leaned in, her voice trembling. The company has a debt covenant with a private lender called Fortress Capital. She said fast, we have to maintain a certain cash-to-debt ratio. If we dip below it, the bank can call the entire loan immediately. Voss Meridian owes $400 million, and we dipped below it 3 months ago. She whispered, the business is failing. Lila, the sales aren't real. The consulting fees you saw? That is Graham moving cash around to make the balance sheet look solvent for the snapshot date. He borrows money from these short-term lenders, puts it in the main account to pass the audit, and then pays it back the next day with interest. It is a shell game. I felt sick. It was Ponzi scheme logic applied to a billion-dollar corporation. What happens when he runs out of lenders? I asked. Naomi looked me in the eye. That is the thing. He is running out. He is patching holes with credit cards. Effectively, and when the music stops, the breach triggers, the bank takes the company, the stock goes to zero, the pensions vanish. And Ethan? I asked. She looked down at her shoes, the internal memos, the ones authorizing the transfers to the fake vendors. They are all signed by E. Voss. I leaned back against the cold tile wall. The picture was complete. Graham wasn't just looting the company, he was preparing to eject. He was going to let the covenant breach happen, let the company collapse, and when the regulators came looking for the person responsible for the fraudulent transfers, all the paper trails would lead to the LLC, to the signature, to Ethan. Graham would play the devastated father who had been betrayed by his incompetent, thieving son. He would walk away with the money he had siphoned off, and Ethan would go to prison. Naomi started to back away. I have to go. Please don't call me again. She disappeared into the crowd. I stood there for a long time. The rush hour crowd flowed around me like water around a stone. I thought about the dinner, the way Graham had laughed, the way he had called me trash. He thought I was weak. He thought I was just a social climber who would take the abuse to stay close to the money. He thought Ethan was a pawn to be sacrificed. I took a deep breath. The air in the station was stale, but it filled my lungs. I wasn't leaving. I wasn't filing for divorce, and I wasn't going to let Ethan be the scapegoat for a man who didn't know the meaning of the word family. I took out my phone and called Mara Klein. Don't file the fraud complaint yet. I said, why? She asked. Because if we file now, he burns the building down. I said, I do not want to just clear Ethan's name. I want to take the matches away from Graham. I hung up. I walked out of the station and into the night. The city lights were bright, reflecting off the wet pavement. I looked up at the skyline, at the distant logo of Voss Meridian glowing atop a skyscraper. It looked powerful from down here, but I knew the truth. It was hollow. I was going to buy it, and then I was going to fire him. Revenge is often depicted as a hot, screaming thing, a glass thrown against a wall or a slap across a face in a crowded room. But in the world of high finance, revenge is cold. It is quiet. It is a stack of documents sitting on a conference table in a windowless room, signed in blue ink. I created the weapon on a Tuesday morning. It was a Delaware-registered limited liability company named Harborlight Partners. The name was intentionally boring. It sounded like a retirement fund or a small family office, the kind of entity that appears on a shareholder registry and no one blinks. I sat in Mara Klein's office, watching her slide the incorporation papers across the desk. "This is it," Mara said. "Once you sign this, you are the managing partner. You have full discretion over the funds." I picked up the pen. The funding structure was a fragile, terrifying patchwork. I had liquidated my own investment portfolio, $700,000 saved over a decade of 80-hour weeks. It was my freedom money, the safety net I had built to ensure I never had to depend on a man for survival. Now, I was throwing it into the fire, but I wasn't alone. I had reached out to 3 former clients, quiet backers who knew my work ethic and had no love for the Voss family's monopolistic tactics. They put in $2 million combined. And then there was the heavy hitter, Ironwood Credit, a private debt firm that specialized in distressed assets. They had agreed to front me a line of credit based on my analysis of Meridian's covenant breach. They were betting against Graham, and they were betting on me. I signed my name, Lila Coleman. The ink soaked into the paper. I wasn't just an in-law anymore. I was an institutional investor. "Now we need a face," I said. Capping the pen, "Graham knows my name. If he sees Lila Coleman buying shares, he will block the trades or dilute the stock before I can get a foothold. We need someone he underestimates, or someone he thinks he has already beaten." Mara nodded. "Who do you have in mind?" "Dane Mercer," I said. Mara raised an eyebrow. "The former COO of Meridian? Graham fired him 5 years ago. I heard he retired to a vineyard and refuses to talk to anyone in the industry. That is why he is perfect." I said, "He knows where the bodies are buried, and he has a reason to pick up a shovel." I drove 3 hours to the coast to find him. Dane Mercer lived in a modernist glass box overlooking the ocean, a monument to a golden parachute. He was in his 60s, tanned and fit, wearing a linen shirt that cost more than my first car. He looked like a man at peace. He didn't invite me in. We stood on his deck, the wind whipping my hair across my face. "Go home, Lila," he said, sipping an iced tea. "I know who you are. I heard about the dinner. Graham is a bully. Being married to his son is a tragedy. But it is not my problem. It is your problem if he destroys the pension fund you are still vested in." I said. Dane laughed. "The pension is fully funded. Voss Meridian is a fortress. It is a movie set." I corrected him. I opened my briefcase and took out a single sheet of paper, a summary of the consulting payments and the debt-to-equity ratio I had reconstructed. I held it out to him. "Just look at the trend line on the operational expenses," I said. Dane hesitated, then took the paper. He put on a pair of reading glasses. He scanned the numbers. His expression didn't change, but his posture did. He stiffened. "These vendor names," he muttered. "Orchard and Slate. I remember them." "You do?" "Graham used to talk about creative accounting back in the day," Dane said, looking up at me. He had a friend, a lawyer who lost his license, Silas Orchard. I thought Graham cut ties with him decades ago. He didn't. I said, "He is funneling millions to him, and the liquidity is drying up. Dane, the company is going to breach its covenants with Fortress Capital in less than 2 months. If that happens, the bank takes the keys, the equity goes to zero, the employees, the ones you hired, get nothing." Dane looked back at the ocean. He was a wealthy man, but he was also a man who had built the operational backbone of that company. He had pride in the machine, even if he hated the driver. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "I want you to be the chairman of my proposed slate." I said, "I am building a vehicle to buy a controlling stake. I need someone the minority shareholders trust. They won't trust an angry daughter-in-law. They will trust Dane Mercer." He turned to face me. "This is a hostile takeover." "No," I said, "it is a rescue mission." Dane stared at me for a long time. I saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. He missed the game. Men like him always miss the game. I am not doing this for revenge, he said sternly. Neither am I. I lied. Or maybe it wasn't a lie. Revenge was just the fuel. The destination was justice. He extended his hand. I am in. But we do it by the book. No leaks. No hacking. If we win because we are better, not because we are dirtier. Agreed. I said. I drove back to the city feeling a strange, vibrating energy in my chest. I had an army now. I had capital. I had a general. But the war at home was just beginning. The social retaliation started with the subtlety of a scalpel. Celeste Voss hosted the Sapphire Luncheon every year. It was the premier philanthropic event in Harborgate, a gathering of the city's most influential women to raise money for children's hospitals. As Ethan's wife, I had been on the committee for 3 years. I had organized the silent auction. I had seated the donors. 2 days after I formed Harbor Light, I checked the online committee list to verify a vendor contact. My name was gone. I refreshed the page. It wasn't a glitch. The list of committee members had been updated that morning. Lila Coleman Voss had been deleted. In its place was the name of a local heiress, a woman Graham had always said Ethan should have married. I checked my email. There was a notification from the event platform. You have been removed from the Sapphire Luncheon organization group by administrator. The administrator was Celeste. It stung more than I expected. This was the female sphere of power, the soft power that dictated who was welcomed in the city and who was invisible. By erasing me, Celeste was signaling to every doctor's wife, every banker's spouse, and every socialite in Harborgate that I was persona non grata. That afternoon, I walked past a newsstand near my office, the Harborgate Star, a tabloid that Graham practically kept on a retainer, had a headline in the sidebar of the front page. The Climber Diaries, How New Money Traps Old Fortunes. I bought a copy, my hands shaking slightly. The article didn't name me. It didn't have to. It described a certain corporate consultant who had married into a prominent industrial family and was now causing rifts with her demands for status. It painted a picture of a grasping, cold woman who was alienating a beloved son from his doting parents. It was fiction, but it was effective fiction. It was designed to isolate me. If I tried to speak out later, people would already have a narrative for me. The bitter, greedy outsider. I threw the paper in a trash can 3 blocks away. I would not let them see me bleed. But Ethan saw the blood. He came home that evening holding a piece of paper. It was a business card. Mara Klein's business card. I had left it in my blazer pocket. He had taken the blazer to the dry cleaner for me, trying to be helpful, trying to fix the unfixable distance between us. He stood in the kitchen, his face pale. Mara Klein, he said. Reading the card, I looked her up. Lila. She is a corporate shark. She specializes in executive disputes and high-asset divorce. He looked at me, his eyes filling with a mixture of terror and betrayal. Is this what you have been doing? You are planning to leave me. No. Ethan, I said, stepping toward him. Don't lie to me, he shouted, his voice cracking. He slammed the card on the counter. My father was right. You are preparing an exit strategy. You are building a case. That is why you have been so quiet. That is why you are working late. You are going to divorce me and try to take half of what I don't even have yet. He looked broken. He looked like a child who had been told the world was ending. I grabbed his hands. He tried to pull away, but I held on. Ethan, look at me. I am not hiring her to divorce you. I hired her to protect you. Protect me from what? He spat. From my own family? Yes, I said, my voice rising. From the LLC that was opened in your name. From the $5 million guarantee you supposedly signed. From the fact that your father is setting you up to take the fall for a massive financial fraud. Ethan froze. What are you talking about? I went to my bag and pulled out the copy of the tax notice and the guarantee document Mara had pulled. I slapped them onto the island counter. Look at the signature. Ethan, look at it. He picked up the papers. His hands were trembling so hard the paper rattled. He stared at the signature on the guarantee. "That looks like mine," he whispered. "But look at the date," I said. "Where were we on October 12th? He frowned, thinking. "We were in Cabo. For your birthday." "Exactly," I said. "You were on a boat with me. You didn't sign a loan document in Harborgate. Someone traced your signature." Ethan dropped the paper. He backed away from the counter. No. He wouldn't do that. "It is a mistake. It is an administrative error. It is a crime, Ethan, and it is tied to you." He looked at me, his eyes wild. He wants to believe his father is a hero. He needs that belief like he needs oxygen. To accept that Graham is a criminal who would sacrifice his own son is to accept that he has been unloved his entire life. "You are lying," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You are making this up to hurt him because he insulted you. You are twisted. Lila." He turned and walked out of the apartment. The door slammed, leaving a silence that felt like a physical blow. I sank to the floor of the kitchen. I wanted to cry. I wanted to chase him. But I knew I couldn't save him with words. I had to save him with ownership. The next morning, I had a notification on my encrypted messaging app. It was from Naomi. "I have something. Dropbox behind the coffee shop on 4th. Blue envelope." I went immediately. The envelope was taped under the lid of a dumpster in the alley. It was filthy, but the contents were pristine. It was a vendor list, but detailed. It showed the payment schedules for Orchard and Slate Advisory. I took it to my office and started digging. I ran a background check on Silas Orchard. The name Dane had given me. He was dead. He had died 3 years ago. So who was cashing the checks? I followed the routing numbers. They didn't go to a corporate account. They went to a trust, the OS Legacy Trust. I pulled the deed for the trust. The beneficiary wasn't Silas Orchard's family. It was a holding company registered in the Cayman Islands. And the trustee? A man named Victor Kress. I searched for Victor Kress. There was almost no digital footprint. But then I found a photo from a charity golf tournament in 1998. It was a grainy scan from a newsletter. There were 4 men standing around a trophy. Graham Voss was in the center. To his left was a man identified as Silas Orchard. To his right was a man identified as Victor Kress. Graham wasn't paying a consultant. He was paying his old college buddies to hold money for him offshore. It was a piggy bank. He was draining the company's operating cash into a private reserve, likely preparing to flee or restart when the main ship went down. This was the smoking gun. But a smoking gun is useless if the sheriff is corrupt. I couldn't go to the board. The board was handpicked by Graham. I couldn't go to the police yet. Financial crimes took years to investigate, and Graham would shred the evidence before a subpoena ever landed. I needed a pressure valve. I needed the threat of exposure to be so imminent that Graham would make a mistake. I sent a secure email to Tessa Mora. Tessa was a financial journalist for a national wire service. She had a reputation for destroying CEOs who thought they were gods. She was cynical, brilliant, and hated the Voss family because Graham had once sued her paper for libel and won on a technicality. We met in a diner on the outskirts of the city, a place where truckers ate pie at 3 p.m. Tessa slid into the booth opposite me. She didn't look like a reporter from the movies. She looked like a tired mom, wearing a hoodie and no makeup. "You have 5 minutes." She said, "I am working on a deadline." I slid a flash drive across the table. It contained the summary of the LLC, the fake vendor payments, and the connection to Victor Kress. "This isn't a story for today," I said. "Then why are you giving it to me?" she asked, pocketing the drive. "It is insurance," I said. "I'm going to make a move on the company, a proxy fight. When I do, Graham is going to try to bury the evidence. He might try to destroy the servers. He might try to hurt the people who helped me." I looked her in the eye. "If anything happens to me, or if the data inside Meridian starts disappearing." "You publish." Tessa looked at me, really looked at me. "You are the daughter-in-law, the one he called trash. News travels fast." I said, she smiled, "A sharp, dangerous thing. I heard he said it in front of the senator. That takes arrogance." "He mistakes arrogance for strength," I said. Tessa tapped her pocket. "I will verify everything. If it checks out, I will have a draft ready. But I want the exclusive on the takeover. You will get it. I promised. I left the diner feeling lighter. I had set the trap. Now I just needed to walk into it. But the rabbit hole went deeper. As part of my due diligence for Harbor Light, I had to analyze the operational risks. Voss Meridian had been touting its Green Transition Initiative for 2 years. They claimed to be retrofitting their chemical processing plants to be carbon neutral. They had spent $300 million on it. According to the press releases, I looked at the capital expenditure reports. The money had been spent, yes, but not on equipment. It had been spent on licensing fees and intellectual property acquisition from North Point Logistics, another one of the fake vendors. I felt a cold dread in my stomach. If they hadn't bought the new scrubbers and filters, what were they using? I found a forum online for former employees. I searched for safety. I found a post from 6 months ago by a user named Pipefitter88. They just painted the old tanks green, literally painted them. The pressure valves are from the 90s. Someone is going to die. It wasn't just fraud. It was a ticking time bomb. Graham was deferring safety maintenance to pay himself, masking it as an environmental crusade. If one of those tanks ruptured, it wouldn't just be a bankruptcy, it would be a mass casualty event. This changed everything. I wasn't just fighting for Ethan's name or my dignity anymore. I was fighting to stop a disaster. I called Dane Mercer. We need to move. I said, now. Are we ready? He asked. We have to be. I said, the factory is a hazard. We can't wait for the annual meeting. We have to trigger a special meeting. How much voting power do we have? We have the 3% I bought on the open market. I said, we need 15% to call a meeting. Then you better start dialing. Dane said, I set up a war room in the living room of my apartment. I had 3 monitors, a headset, and a pot of coffee that never went empty. I started with the institutional holders, the mid-sized pension funds and asset managers who held blocks of Meridian stock. They were unhappy with the stock performance, but they were terrified of Graham. Hello. My name is Lila Coleman. I said, over and over again. I am representing Harbor Light Partners. We are concerned about the governance direction of Voss Meridian. I was hung up on. I was laughed at. I was told that a daughter-in-law should stick to charity lunches. But I kept calling. I spoke their language. I didn't talk about feelings. I talked about EBITDA. I talked about covenant breaches. I talked about the liability of the aging infrastructure. I told them, Graham Voss is betting your money on a shell game. I am offering you a look at the books. Slowly, the tide turned. A teacher's pension fund in Ohio agreed to pledge their votes. A small hedge fund in London signed on. They were small blocks, but they added up. I worked for 4 days straight, sleeping in 2-hour bursts. I stopped eating regular meals. I lived on adrenaline and the cold. Hard certainty that I was right. Ethan came home late one night during this marathon. He looked like a ghost. He walked past the war room, saw the screens, the papers scattered everywhere. He stopped in the doorway. You are really doing it, he said softly. You are going to war with him. I took off my headset. I am saving the company. Ethan. He looked at me with a sadness that broke my heart. You are going to win, aren't you? I hope so. He nodded slowly. He didn't say he supported me. He didn't say he believed me about the signature, but he didn't tell me to stop. He walked to the bedroom and closed the door. It was a truce, fragile and temporary. By Friday afternoon, we had it. I looked at the spreadsheet. We had pledges for 14.8% of the voting shares. We needed 0.2% more. I scanned the shareholder list. There was one name I hadn't called, a family trust in Vermont. It was small, just enough to push us over the line. I dialed the number. An old woman answered. I gave my pitch. I was tired, my voice rasping. I told her the truth. I told her that the man running the company was risking everything for his own ego. She listened. Then she said, You sound like a woman who is tired of being told to sit down. I am. I said, I will sign. She said. I hung up the phone. I sat in the silence of my apartment, the hum of the computers the only sound. We had the numbers. On Monday morning, we would file the demand for a special meeting. We would blindside Graham. My phone buzzed. A voicemail. I picked it up. It was my father. I hadn't spoken to him since the news of the dinner insult had spread. I expected him to be angry on my behalf. I expected him to ask if I was okay. I pressed play. "Lila, it is Dad," his voice said. It sounded tinny, distant. "Your mother and I saw the paper, the article about the climber. Look, I don't know what is going on over there, but you need to be careful. Graham Voss is a powerful man. You have a good life there. Lila, you have a roof over your head that we could never afford. Don't throw it away because of your pride. You were always too sensitive. Just be grateful for what you have. Call your mother." The message ended. I sat there, holding the phone. Be grateful. That was the anthem of my childhood. Be grateful for the scraps. Be grateful we let you go to college. Be grateful a rich man looked at you. Be grateful you are allowed in the room, even if they call you trash. It was the conditioning that had made me stay silent at the dinner. It was the voice that told me I didn't belong. But I looked at the monitors. I looked at the spreadsheet. I looked at the coalition I had built from nothing but intelligence and will. I wasn't lucky. I was capable. I wasn't a guest in this world. I was an owner. I pressed the delete button. The message vanished. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights of Harbor Gate. Somewhere out there, Graham Voss was sleeping, thinking he was safe, thinking I was just a girl who should be grateful. I wasn't grateful. I was coming for him. The summon arrived at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. It was not an email or a text message. It was a physical card delivered by a courier to my desk at the consultancy firm where I still worked. Despite the rumors swirling around my name, the card was heavy cream stock, embossed with the Voss Meridian logo. It had a time and a location written in Graham's jagged, architectural handwriting. My office, 10 o'clock. Do not be late. I stared at the card. It was a command, not an invitation. He was testing my obedience. If I went, I was acknowledging his authority. If I stayed, I was showing fear. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked to the elevator. I would go, but I would not go as a daughter-in-law. I would go as a shareholder. Graham's office was on the top floor of the Meridian Tower, a glass box that looked down on the city of Harbor Gate, like a lord surveying his fiefdom. The secretary, a woman named Helen who had been with him for 30 years and knew where every skeleton was buried, did not smile when I entered. She simply pressed a button on her desk, and the heavy double doors clicked open. Graham was standing by the window. He did not turn around when I walked in. He let the silence stretch, a power move designed to make me speak first, to make me fill the void with nervous chatter. I sat down in one of the leather armchairs and waited. I counted the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. I got to 45 before he turned. He looked tired. The lines around his eyes were deeper than they had been at the dinner, but his suit was immaculate, a charcoal armor against the world. "Lila," he said. His voice was warm, almost fatherly. It was the most dangerous tone he possessed. "Thank you for coming. I kept my face neutral. You asked to see me." "Graham." He walked to his desk and sat down, folding his hands on the mahogany surface. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and disappointment. "We have gotten off on the wrong foot. You and I," he said. "I admit, I was harsh at the dinner. I had a few drinks. I am a passionate man. Lila, sometimes my humor misses the mark." "It was not humor," I said calmly. He waved a hand dismissively. "Semantics. The point is, I think we both want the same thing. We want Ethan to be happy. We want the family to be at peace." He opened a drawer and pulled out a thin blue folder. He slid it across the desk. It stopped exactly at the edge, right in front of me. I picked it up. Inside was a check. It was made out to Lila Coleman. The amount was $5 million. Beneath the check was a legal document. I scanned the first page. It was a separation agreement, a non-disclosure agreement, a divorce settlement. "It is a lot of money," Graham said softly. "It is enough to start your own firm." Enough to buy a house in the south of France. Enough to never have to work another day in your life. I looked up at him. You are trying to buy me. I am offering you grace, he corrected. This marriage. Let us be honest. Lila, it is not working. You are unhappy. Ethan is confused. You come from different worlds. You are a striver, and there is nothing wrong with that. I respect ambition, but you are not a Voss. You never will be. He leaned forward. Take the money. Sign the papers. Walk away. We will frame it as an amicable split. No one has to know about the unpleasantness. You get a clean break and a fortune. I looked at the check again. $5 million. It was more money than my parents would earn in 10 lifetimes. It was freedom, but it was also a bribe. It was the price of my silence. It was the cost of letting him bury the company and pin the crime on Ethan. I placed the folder back on the desk. I did not close it. I left it open. The numbers staring up at the ceiling. I am not for sale. Graham? Graham's smile didn't falter, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Everyone is for sale. Lila, it is just a question of currency. If 5 million is not enough, tell me the number. There is no number. I said, I am not leaving Ethan, and I am not leaving the company alone. Graham stared at me. The warmth vanished from his eyes, replaced by a flat, reptile stillness. He sat back in his chair. You are making a mistake. I don't think I am. You think you are smart, he said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. You found a few discrepancies in the books. You think that gives you leverage, but you have no idea how this world works. I built this city. I own the judges. I own the papers. He stood up, towering over the desk. If you do not take this deal, I will ruin you. I will make sure you never work in this industry again. I will blacklist you from every board, every firm, every charity. And Ethan? I will cut him off. I will freeze his trust. I will leave him destitute. Do you think your love can survive that? Do you think he will stay with the woman who cost him his inheritance? I stood up too. My legs were trembling, but I locked my knees so he wouldn't see. Ethan does not have an inheritance. Graham, I said, you spent it. Graham's face twisted. A flash of pure, unadulterated rage crossed his features. Get out. I walked to the door. I didn't look back. But as I grabbed the handle, he spoke one last time. You are going to regret this. Lila. You are going to wish you had taken the money and run. I walked out past Helen, who was typing furiously and pretending she hadn't heard the shouting. I made it to the elevator before I had to lean against the wall and breathe. I had just declared war on a billionaire, and I had refused the only lifeboat he was ever going to offer. While I was facing the father, the son was facing the truth. Ethan had taken the morning off work. He hadn't told me where he was going, but I knew. He had taken the documents I gave him, the tax notice and the guarantee, to the Secretary of State's office. He needed to see the original filing with his own eyes. He called me an hour after I left Graham's office. His voice sounded strange, detached. It is real, he said. Where are you? I asked. I am in the car. I saw the filing. Lila. The signature. It is traced. I can see the pressure marks where they pressed down on the paper, and the notary stamp. It belongs to a woman who used to work for my father 20 years ago. She is retired now. He took a jagged breath. He did it. He actually did it. Come home. Ethan. I said, we can talk about it. No. He said, I have to go see him. Ethan, don't. He is dangerous right now. I have to look him in the eye. Lila. I have to ask him why. He hung up. I found out what happened later that night. Ethan came home and sat in the dark living room, staring at the wall. He told me the story in fragments, his voice devoid of emotion, like he was reporting a traffic accident. He had walked into Graham's office 10 minutes after I left. Graham was still pacing, furious. When he saw Ethan, he tried to pivot back to the benevolent patriarch role, but Ethan threw the certified copy of the LLC formation on the desk. Why? Ethan had asked. Why did you use my name? Graham didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He simply poured himself a drink and looked at his son with cold pragmatism. Because we needed a shield, Graham had said. The company is going through a transition. We needed an entity to hold certain liabilities. And you chose me? Ethan asked. You chose to put me in legal jeopardy? Graham sighed, as if explaining a complex math problem to a slow child. You are a Voss. Ethan, that name comes with privileges, but it also comes with duties. A son exists to protect the dynasty. That is your function. If the storm comes, you take the reins so the house stays dry. That is what family does. That is not what family does, Ethan had shouted. Family protects each other. You are setting me up to go to prison. Graham had slammed his glass down. You will not go to prison. I have lawyers who can spin this in circles for a decade. Stop being so dramatic. You are sacrificing nothing but a little peace of mind. And in exchange, you have lived a life of kings. Do you think the cars, the trips, the penthouse, do you think that falls from the sky? It costs money, Ethan. And sometimes, making money requires flexibility. Ethan had looked at his father, really looked at him, and realized that Graham didn't see a son. He saw an asset. He saw a human shield. I walked out. Ethan told me. Sitting in the dark. He was still talking about duty and legacy. I just walked out. I sat beside him and took his hand. He didn't pull away this time, but his hand was cold. I don't know who I am. He whispered, If I am not his son, who am I? You are Ethan, I said, and you are my husband, and you are a good man. He didn't answer. He just stared into the darkness, the foundation of his reality crumbling into dust. The war room in my apartment became the center of operations. Dane Mercer was earning his title as general. He had set up a secure server for us to communicate, bypassing the regular networks. We have movement. Dane said on a video call on Thursday, I have been reaching out to the old guard. The managers who were pushed out or sidelined when Graham started bringing in his cronies, they are scared, but they are talking. He held up a list. I have 3 department heads ready to sign affidavits about the safety violations. They have emails from Graham explicitly denying budget requests for maintenance. That is our smoking gun for the negligence claim. Good. I said, What about the proxy votes? We are close, Dane said. But Graham is countering. He is calling the major shareholders personally. He is promising special dividends. He is telling them, you are a corporate raider who wants to break up the company and sell the parts. We need to file the preliminary proxy statement. I said, We need to make our platform public. Agreed, Dane said. But Lila, there is a problem with Naomi. My stomach tightened. What happened? She called me from a burner phone. Dane said, She was followed home last night. A black sedan. It sat outside her apartment building all night. She is terrified. Lila. She wants to pull out. She says she can't testify if they are watching her. I closed my laptop and grabbed my coat. I will handle it. I met Naomi in the back of a 24-hour laundromat in a different district. She was wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, shaking so hard she could barely hold her cup of coffee. I can't do this. Lila, she said, tears streaming down her face. I am a single woman. I have a cat. I have a mortgage. I am not a hero. I saw that car. They know. I sat down next to her on the plastic bench. The air smelled of detergent and dryer sheets. I am not asking you to be a hero, Naomi. I am asking you to be a witness. She shook her head. They will fire me. They will blacklist me. I will never work in finance again. I reached into my bag and pulled out a document Mara Klein had drafted. It was an employment contract. Harborlight Partners is hiring. I said, This is a contract for a senior analyst position. The salary is 20% higher than what you make at Meridian. It is guaranteed for 2 years, regardless of what happens with the takeover. Naomi stared at the paper. You would hire me? I need people who know the truth. I said, and I need people who are brave enough to tell it. If you sign this, you resign from Meridian tomorrow. You come work for me. They can't threaten your job if you don't work for them anymore. She looked at the contract, then at me. What about the car? I have hired a private security firm. I said, "It is costing me a fortune. But they will have a detail on you starting tonight. You will be safe. Naomi, I promise." She looked at me with wide, wet eyes. She saw that I wasn't just using her. I was investing in her. She took the pen. "I hope you know what you are doing." "Lila, so do I." I thought. The next twist came from the least expected source. I was leaving the laundromat when a text message popped up on my phone. Unknown number. Street? Jude's Cathedral. Third pew on the left. Now, I knew who it was. There was only one person in the Voss orbit who used the church as a shield. I took a taxi to the cathedral. It was empty, the vast stone space echoing with silence. The smell of incense and beeswax was heavy in the air. Celeste Voss was sitting in the third pew, wearing a trench coat and a headscarf. She didn't look like the queen of Harborgate society. She looked small. I sat down next to her, leaving a foot of space between us. "Did he offer you the money?" she asked, staring at the altar. "Yes," I said. "5 million? And you refused?" "Yes." Celeste let out a long, shuddering breath. "I was offered 10,000, 30 years ago." I turned to look at her. "What, Graham?" she said. "When we were first married, I found out he was moving money from my father's accounts." I confronted him. "He offered me $10,000 to buy a new car and forget about it." She turned to face me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "I took the money. Lila, I took it because I was pregnant with Ethan. I took it because I was scared. And because I took it, I became his accomplice." She reached into her coat pocket. "Over the years, he made me sign things," she whispered. "Deeds, trusts. I didn't read them. I didn't want to know. I just wanted to keep the peace. I wanted a happy home for my son. But it wasn't a home. It was a stage set." She pressed a small, cold metal object into my hand. "What is this?" I asked. "It is a key," she said, "to a safe deposit box at First National. It is in my name. But Graham put the files there years ago because he thought no one would ever subpoena his wife." "What is inside?" "The history," she said. "The proof that this didn't start with the current crisis. He has been hollowing out the company since the day his father died." "Why are you giving this to me?" I asked. "You are betraying him." Celeste looked at the statue of the Virgin Mary. "He told me what he said to Ethan, that a son exists to protect the dynasty." She closed her eyes, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. "A mother exists to protect her child." She said fiercely, "Save him, Lila. Destroy the company if you have to, but save my son." She stood up and walked away, her heels clicking on the stone floor, leaving me with the key to the empire. I went to the bank immediately. The safe deposit box was long and narrow, smelling of stale air. Inside, there were no jewels or cash, just paper. I sat in the private viewing room and read. It was a graveyard of corporate ethics. There were memos from the late 90s detailing a scheme to inflate asset values. There were emails to Victor Kress discussing the offshore accounts. But the most damning item was a handwritten letter. It was dated 15 years ago. It was from Graham's founding partner, a man named Arthur Pence, who had died of a heart attack shortly after the letter was written. Graham, the letter read, "You are eating the seed corn. You cannot strip the maintenance budget to pay dividends. Eventually, the machines will break. Eventually, the men will get hurt. You are building a tomb, not a legacy. Stop before you kill someone." I held the letter. My hands were shaking. This wasn't just financial fraud. This was premeditated negligence. Graham had been warned. He had known for 15 years that he was driving the company off a cliff. And he had kept his foot on the gas because it paid for the penthouse, the parties, the power. He wasn't a businessman. He was a parasite. I made copies of everything. Then I put the originals back in the box and locked it. I had the ammunition. Now I just needed to survive long enough to fire the gun. Graham must have sensed that the walls were closing in, because the next day, he launched the nuclear option. I woke up to my phone blowing up. Texts from friends, former colleagues, Even my cousin. Are you okay? Don't read the news. Call me. I opened the news app. The headline on the business page was brutal. The Black Widow of Harborgate. Inside the hostile takeover attempt of Voss Meridian. The article was a masterpiece of spin. It cited anonymous sources close to the family, who claimed that Lila Coleman had married Ethan Voss specifically to gain access to insider information. It painted me as a manipulative genius who had seduced a troubled and weak heir to launch a coup against a beloved patriarch. It claimed I was funded by vulture capitalists who wanted to fire thousands of workers and sell the company for parts. It was a lie, but it was a believable lie. It played into every stereotype about ambitious women and old money. I went to the kitchen. Ethan was reading the article on his tablet. He looked sick. They are calling me weak, he said quietly. Troubled and weak. That is what my father told the press. It is a tactic. Ethan, I said, pouring coffee. He is trying to discredit us. He looked up at me. His eyes were dull. It is working. Lila, my friends, they are blocking my number. The club revoked my membership this morning. We are pariahs. We are fighting for the truth. I said, the truth? He laughed. A harsh, cracking sound. The truth doesn't matter. Lila, perception matters. And right now, the perception is that you are a monster and I am an idiot. He stood up and threw the tablet on the table. I can't do this. I can't live like this. He walked out of the apartment. I didn't chase him. I couldn't. I was too tired. I sank onto the floor of the kitchen, leaning against the cabinets. The adrenaline that had fueled me for weeks was gone, replaced by a crushing, leaden exhaustion. I looked around the beautiful penthouse. It felt like a cage. Was I wrong? Was I destroying my marriage for a company that didn't care about me? Maybe I should have taken the money. Maybe I should have just been grateful and quiet. I pulled my knees to my chest. I felt small. I felt like the girl from the working-class neighborhood who had dared to reach for the stars and had gotten burned. But then I thought of the letter from Arthur Pence. Stop before you kill someone. I thought of the painted tanks, the employees who didn't know they were working on a bomb. I wasn't fighting for status. I was fighting for reality. I stayed on the floor for an hour. Then I got up, washed my face, and went back to the war room. Ethan didn't come back until after midnight. He smelled of scotch and cold air. I was sitting on the sofa, waiting for him. The lights were off, save for the glow of the city outside. He stood in the entryway, swaying slightly. I saw him. He said, "Who?" "My father. I went to the club. He was there, holding court." "What did he say?" Ethan walked into the room and collapsed into the armchair opposite me. He said the offer is still on the table, for both of us. If I denounce you, if I say you manipulated me, he will reinstate my trust. He will welcome me back. And, I asked, my voice steady. Ethan put his head in his hands. He looked so young, so broken. I miss him. Lila, I hate him, but I miss him. It is so cold outside. Being in his light, it is warm. It is a lie, but it is warm. I stood up and walked over to him. I knelt in front of him, forcing him to look at me. "Ethan, look at me." He raised his eyes. They were filled with tears. "I am not going to ask you to choose me over him." I said softly, "I know that is an impossible choice. He is your father." I took his hands. "But I am asking you to choose reality over a lie. The warmth you feel? It is burning the house down. It is burning the workers. It is burning your future. If you go back to him, you are agreeing to be the sacrifice. You are agreeing to let him use your name to commit crimes." I squeezed his hands. "I love you, but I cannot save you if you want to be a victim. You have to decide. Do you want to be a son, or do you want to be a man?" Ethan looked at me. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. He didn't answer. He pulled his hands away from mine and stood up. He walked to the bedroom and closed the door, leaving me alone in the dark. The tension hung in the air like smoke. We were at the edge of the cliff. Tomorrow. the proxy fight would officially begin. I would either save the company or I would lose everything: my husband, my reputation, and my home. I went to the window and looked at the Meridian Tower. "Bring it on." "Graham," I whispered. The number on the spreadsheet was small, just 2 digits, but it weighed more than the entire Voss Meridian Tower. 15.2%. That was the threshold. In the state of Delaware, where the company was incorporated, 15% ownership allowed a group of shareholders to call a special meeting without the board's approval. It was the nuclear key code. I sat in the war room of my apartment, the air conditioner humming a low, steady note. Dane Mercer stood by the window, looking out at the city. He held a glass of water, his knuckles white against the condensation. "We have it," I said quietly. Dane turned. "You verified the signatures?" "Every single one." I said, "The teachers' pension fund, the London hedge fund, the angry cousins in Vermont. We have 15.2% of the voting power. We can force the meeting." Dane let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for 5 years. "He is going to lose his mind. Lila, when we file this demand, he is going to realize the walls are actually solid." "Let him," I said. I picked up the phone and called Mara Klein. "File the 13D," I said, "and serve the demand letter to the corporate secretary. We are calling a special meeting for the removal of the CEO and the election of a new board slate." "When?" Mara asked. Her voice was sharp, professional. "As soon as the bylaws allow." I said, 10 days. I hung up. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy, static-charged silence before a lightning strike. I met Tessa Mora an hour later. We chose a place where no one from the Voss inner circle would ever be caught dead: a public library in the university district. We sat in a study room with glass walls. Visible but unheard, I handed her a flash drive. It was the second installment. "What is this?" Tessa asked, turning the drive over in her fingers. "This is the dead man's switch," I said. I opened my laptop and showed her the file structure. Inside were the summaries of the safety violations, the fake vendor payments to the Cayman Trust, and the letter from Arthur Pence warning Graham about the negligence. "I am filing for a special meeting today," I told her. "When Graham gets served, his first instinct will be to destroy evidence. He will wipe servers. He will shred paper. He might even try to burn a warehouse." "And?" Tessa asked. Her eyes locked on mine. "And if he does," I said, "you publish. You release the story that he is destroying evidence of a massive fraud. You frame it not as a business dispute, but as a criminal cover-up." Tessa nodded slowly. "A deterrent. You are holding a gun to his head so he doesn't delete the hard drives." "Exactly," I said. "But if he plays by the rules, if he lets the vote happen without burning the place down, then you hold the story until after the meeting. I want to beat him in the boardroom. Tessa, I want the shareholders to fire him because he is incompetent, not just because he is a criminal. It needs to be a governance win, not a scandal dump." Tessa pocketed the drive. "You are taking a hell of a risk. Leela, if he destroys the evidence before I can verify it independently, you are left with nothing but smoke. I trust his ego." I said, "He doesn't think he needs to destroy the evidence because he doesn't think a woman can actually beat him. He thinks I am a nuisance, not a threat." I was half right. Graham didn't think I could beat him, but he knew I could hurt him, and like a wounded animal. He lashed out. The announcement hit the wire services at 4 in the afternoon. Voss Meridian announces strategic restructuring plan to ensure long-term liquidity. I read the press release on my phone. Standing in my kitchen, the corporate speak was thick, but the meaning was brutal. Graham was announcing an immediate reduction in force. 2,000 employees were being laid off, effective immediately. He was also freezing all capital expenditures, including the safety upgrades, and putting 3 regional factories up for sale. And the kicker? The quote from Graham Voss himself. "In light of the hostile destabilization efforts by certain activist investors, we are forced to take these painful steps to protect the company's core value. We will not let outside raiders destroy our legacy." He was blaming me. He was firing 2,000 people, 2,000 families, and telling them it was Lila Coleman's fault. He was creating chaos so he could point to the fire and say I was the arsonist. My phone started ringing. It was Dane. He is scorching the earth. Dane shouted, "The unions are going crazy. The employees are terrified. Lila, if the shareholders think your proxy fight is causing this collapse, they will vote with management just to stop the bleeding. Fear makes people conservative." I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It was the same coldness I felt at the dinner, but sharper now. He is taking hostages. I said, "We need a statement." Dane said, "We need to deny it." "No," I said, "a denial looks weak. We need a solution." I hung up and called the managing partner at Ironwood Credit, the private debt firm backing my play. His name was Marcus Thorne. He was a man who looked at spreadsheets the way other men looked at religious texts. "Marcus," I said, "I need a new term sheet." "Lila." Marcus sighed. "The company just announced a liquidity crisis. The risk profile just went through the roof." "I know." I said, "That is why I need a specific package. I need a $200 million stabilization facility, guaranteed, immediate liquidity to stop the layoffs and fund the safety upgrades." "You want me to fund a burning building?" Marcus asked. "No," I said. "I want you to fund the fire department. But there is a condition." "What condition?" "The money only unlocks if Graham Voss is removed as CEO and an independent forensic audit begins within 48 hours. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear Marcus tapping a pen against his desk. "You are weaponizing the debt," he said. "You are telling the shareholders that if they keep Graham, the company starves. If they pick you, the company gets fed." "Exactly." I said, "I am not the raider. Marcus, I am the rescue financing. I will have the term sheet in an hour." Marcus said. I released the counter statement at 6 o'clock. It was short and lacked any adjectives. Harborlight Partners has secured a $200 million emergency financing package to prevent all planned layoffs and immediately fund critical safety repairs at Voss Meridian. This capital is available immediately upon the appointment of a new independent board. Current management offers cuts. We offer capital. The narrative shifted instantly. I wasn't the attacker anymore. I was the only person with a checkbook. But the war wasn't just financial. It was personal. Ethan came to the apartment that night. He didn't have a key anymore. I had changed the locks, a practical measure that felt like an amputation, so he had to buzz up. When I opened the door, he looked like he had aged 10 years in a week. His eyes were red, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He was carrying a cardboard box. He walked past me into the living room and set the box on the coffee table. "He fired Naomi," Ethan said, his voice flat. "What?" I asked, freezing. "He found out she was talking to you. I don't know how. Maybe cameras. Maybe she slipped up. He fired her for gross misconduct and had security escort her out of the building. He threatened to sue her if she spoke to anyone." I felt a spike of panic. Naomi was my key witness for the vendor fraud. "She is safe," I said quickly. "I hired her. She is under my protection." Ethan nodded, staring at the box. "Good. She is a good person." He put his hand on the cardboard lid. I went into the server archives. He said, "I have administrative access because of the LLC. The system thinks I am a corporate officer." He opened the box. Inside was a stack of hard drives and a thick binder of printed emails. I searched for his direct orders. Ethan whispered, "I found them." He pulled out a single sheet of paper and handed it to me. It was an email from Graham to the former head of operations, dated 3 years ago. Subject: Compliance. "Hold on Western Tank Farm. I do not care what the inspector said. The timeline is non-negotiable. Route the approval around the compliance desk. Use the executive override code. If anyone asks, tell them I authorized it personally. We need the cash flow this quarter, not next year." It was the smoking gun. It wasn't just negligence. It was a direct, documented order to bypass safety laws for profit. "Ethan," I said, looking at the paper, "this sends him to prison." Ethan sat down on the sofa and put his head in his hands. His shoulders started to shake. He wasn't crying loudly. It was a silent, racking grief. "He is my father," Ethan choked out. "He taught me how to ride a bike. He bought me my first suit." I sat next to him and put my arm around his shoulders. He leaned into me, heavy and defeated. "I know," I said. "He is a monster," Ethan whispered. And I loved him. He wasn't a hero in that moment. He wasn't the dashing husband saving the day. He was a boy realizing that his idol was a fraud. It was the most courageous thing I had ever seen him do. The next morning, I received a call from St. Jude's Hospital. It was Celeste. She had collapsed at a charity breakfast. The official reason was exhaustion and dehydration. The real reason was that she was living in a war zone. I went to the hospital. The VIP wing was quiet, smelling of expensive sanitizers and lilies. Celeste was lying in a bed that looked too big for her, an IV line taped to her thin hand. She opened her eyes when I walked in. "Did you find it?" she whispered. "The letter in the box?" "Yes," I said, pulling a chair close to the bed. "It is going to save the company." "Celeste." She closed her eyes. "Graham was here an hour ago." I stiffened. "What did he say?" "He told me to issue a statement," she said. "He wants me to say that you are mentally unstable, that you have been harassing the family. He wants me to say that Ethan is being manipulated by a predator." "What did you tell him?" Celeste looked at the ceiling. "I told him I was tired. I told him I couldn't do it today." She turned her head to look at me. Her face was gray, stripped of the makeup and the mask she had worn for 40 years. "I stayed because I didn't know how to leave." She said, "I didn't have my own money. I didn't have a career. I thought if I just kept the peace, eventually he would stop. But he never stops. The hunger just gets bigger." She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was weak, but her skin was warm. "I am a coward, Lila. I know that, but I don't want my son to be one." "Then help me," I said. "I can't testify," she said, tears leaking from her eyes. "I can't stand up in a courtroom and destroy my husband. I am not strong enough." "You don't have to destroy him," I said. "You just have to protect Ethan. When the vote happens, when the board meets to decide, just tell the truth about the signature. That is all. Just say Ethan didn't sign the guarantee." Celeste squeezed my hand. "I will try." The proxy battle went public the next day. It was ugly. Graham went on the biggest business news network in the country. He sat in a high-backed chair, looking the picture of the aggrieved statesman. The interviewer asked him about the Harbor Light Challenge. "It is tragic, really," Graham said, his voice smooth as silk. "Lila is a talented young woman, in her own way, but she is a nobody with ambition. She married my son, and within 3 years, she thinks she knows how to run a global industrial conglomerate. It is arrogance, pure and simple. She doesn't care about the employees. She cares about seeing her name in the papers." The interviewer nodded sympathetically. "And the allegations of financial impropriety?" "Fabrications," Graham said, smiling. "Desperate lies from a desperate group. We are auditing the books ourselves, and we have found zero evidence of these so-called phantom vendors." I watched the interview from my war room. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I typed a response. Voss Meridian Management claims there are no phantom vendors. We have published the bank routing numbers for the OS Legacy Trust on our shareholder portal, along with the corresponding invoices paid by the company. We invite the shareholders to decide if a trust in the Cayman Islands is a legitimate supplier of logistics services. I hit send. Facts. Cold, hard facts. But Graham had one more card to play. He went after the weak link, 2 days before the vote. Mara Klein called me. Her voice was urgent. "We have a problem with Naomi," she said. "A private investigator just tried to serve her with a lawsuit for corporate espionage at her sister's house. They are trying to dox her. Lila, if her name gets out before the meeting, Graham will paint her as a disgruntled ex-employee with a vendetta. It will discredit her testimony. Get the judge," I said. "It is Friday afternoon, Lila. Find a judge," I snapped. Mara worked a miracle. By 5 o'clock, She had obtained an emergency whistleblower protection order. It sealed Naomi's identity in the public filings and prevented Voss Meridian from suing her until the investigation was complete. It wasn't a dramatic rescue with a getaway car. It was a lawyer standing in a clerk's office, filing a motion with a timestamp. But it saved Naomi's life, the night before the special meeting. The city was hit by a thunderstorm. Rain lashed against the windows of my apartment, blurring the lights of the skyline. I couldn't sleep. I was going through the data room one last time, looking for anything we might have missed. I was cross-referencing the asset lists with the proposed sale documents Graham had released as part of his restructuring. He was selling 3 regional factories. That was public. But I noticed something odd about the valuation of the non-core assets bundled with the sale. There was a line item for Project Onyx intellectual property. I stopped. Project Onyx. I had seen that name in the old memos. It was the internal code name for the proprietary chemical catalyst that made Voss Meridian's products 20% cheaper to produce than the competition. It was the crown jewel. It was the secret sauce. Graham had listed it as a depreciated asset with a value of $2 million. The real value was closer to $1 billion. And the buyer? A shell company called Apex Industrial. I ran a search on Apex. It had been formed 2 weeks ago. The registered agent was a law firm in Panama. Graham wasn't just trying to save the company, he was trying to loot it. He was selling the most valuable asset the company owned to himself for pennies. Right before he likely got fired, he was going to strip the value out of Meridian and walk away with the golden goose, leaving the shareholders with an empty shell. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. If he signed that sale agreement before the meeting tomorrow, the company was dead. Even if we won the vote, we would be winning a corpse. I called Dane. He is selling Onyx. I said, "What?" Dane shouted. "He can't. The board has to approve a sale of that size." "He bundled it," I said. "He hid it inside the sale of the regional factories. The board thinks they are just approving a real estate divestiture. They don't know the IP is attached. We have to stop the signing." Dane said, "When is the board meeting?" 8 a.m. Tomorrow. Right before the shareholder meeting. I looked at the clock. It was 2 a.m. "We can't get an injunction in time." I said, "Then what do? We tell them." I said, "We tell the board. Not the shareholders. The board members he handpicked. The ones who think they are just loyal friends. We show them that he is stealing from them too." I spent the rest of the night drafting emails. I attached the valuation of the IP. I attached the proof of the shell company. I sent it to every board member's personal email address. Subject: Urgent. Fraudulent asset transfer in proposed sale. I hit send at 4 a.m. I walked out onto the balcony. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and glistening. The air was cold and sharp. I looked out at the Voss Meridian Tower. It was dark, except for the top floor. Graham was probably there, pacing, thinking he had won, thinking he had outsmarted the girl from the wrong side of the tracks. I leaned against the railing. Tomorrow, I would walk into that building. I would either lose everything, my money, my marriage, my reputation, or I would own it. But standing there, high above the streets, I realized something strange. I wasn't afraid anymore. For years, I had defined my worth by how well I could fit into their world, how well I could dress, how softly I could speak, how much I could please them. I had wanted to be accepted. Now, I didn't care about acceptance. I cared about the truth. I wasn't a climber. I wasn't a gold digger. I was a person who had seen a fire and decided to put it out, even if I had to burn my own hands to do it. I took a deep breath of the cold air. "Let's finish this," I said to the empty city. The grand ballroom of the Harborgate Plaza Hotel was designed to host weddings and galas, events where people drank champagne and pretended the world was beautiful. Today, it smelled of stale coffee, wet wool, and aggressive legal cologne. It was 8 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the air was so thick with tension it felt difficult to breathe. Security was tight. Graham had hired a private firm to man the doors, checking IDs against the shareholder registry with the scrutiny of border guards. I stood near the back of the room with Dane Mercer and Mara Klein. We were a small island of calm in a sea of nervous suits. The room was divided. On the left side sat the institutional investors, the pension fund managers from Ohio, the hedge fund analysts from London, the people who looked at Voss Meridian and saw only a declining stock chart. On the right side sat the loyalists, the local suppliers, the country club friends, the people Graham had charmed or bullied for 30 years. Graham entered at exactly 8:15. He did not look like a man under siege. He looked like a king arriving for his coronation. He wore a navy suit that cost more than my first year of salary. His silver hair perfectly coiffed, his smile easy and practiced. He shook hands as he walked down the center aisle. He clapped men on the back. He winked at the elderly woman from the Vermont Trust. He was betting on fear. He was betting that when push came to shove, these people would be too afraid of change to vote against the name on the building. He walked up to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the crowd of 500 people. "Good morning," he said. His voice was warm, filling the room. "It is wonderful to see so many friends here. I know there has been a lot of noise lately, a lot of rumors, but we are a family, and families stick together." He looked directly at me then. He didn't scowl. He smiled. It was a terrifying, pitying smile. "We are here to put these distractions behind us and get back to work," he said. He sat down to polite, scattered applause. The loyalists clapped loudly. The institutional side sat with their arms crossed. Then it was my turn. I walked to the stage. I could feel the eyes of the room on me. I knew what they saw: the outsider, the climber, the daughter-in-law who didn't know her place. I wore a black suit, severe and simple. I carried no notes, only a laser pointer and a clicker for the screen behind me. I stood at the podium. I didn't smile. I didn't talk about family. "I am not here to tell you a story," I said. My voice was steady, amplified by the speakers. "I am here to show you the math." I clicked the remote. The screen behind me lit up with a spreadsheet. "This is the consolidated balance sheet of Voss Meridian," I said. "It looks healthy. But if you look at the footnotes, you will see payments to 3 vendors: North Point Logistics, Gray Harbor Consulting, and Orchard and Slate." I clicked again. The screen changed to show the bank records I had obtained from the safe deposit box and the invoices Naomi had risked her career to find. "These companies do not exist," I said. "They have no employees. They have no trucks. They have no offices. They are shell entities registered to a trust in the Cayman Islands. A trust controlled by Graham Voss." A murmur went through the room. Graham sat stone still, his face a mask of bored amusement. "Over the last 5 years," I continued, $40 million of shareholder capital, your money, has been transferred to these entities. That is $40 million that was not spent on maintenance." I clicked again. The screen showed the photos of the painted tanks, the rusted valves, the internal emails Ethan had found, ordering the bypass of safety protocols. "This is the Western Tank Farm," I said. "It is a bomb. The management deferred safety upgrades to pay themselves. If this facility fails, the liability will bankrupt this company. Your stock will be worth 0. The murmuring grew louder. People were shifting in their seats. The pension fund managers were taking notes furiously. "But that is not why we are here today," I said. "Fraud is bad, negligence is worse, but theft is unforgivable." I clicked to the final slide. It showed the email I had sent to the board at 4 a.m, the valuation of Project Onyx, and the sale agreement to Apex Industrial. Graham Voss is currently negotiating to sell the company's most valuable asset, the Project Onyx intellectual property, to a shell company he controls. I said, "He is selling it for $2 million. Its market value is $1 billion. The room exploded. People stood up. Shouting erupted from the institutional side. "He is not trying to save the company," I said, raising my voice over the noise. "He is looting it. He knows his time is up, and he is trying to leave with the silverware." I stepped back from the podium. The room was in chaos. The chairman of the meeting, a nervous corporate lawyer, tried to bang his gavel, but no one was listening. Graham stood up. He walked slowly to the microphone. He waited for the noise to die down. He had an incredible presence, a gravity that forced people to look at him. "Lila, Lila, Lila," he said into the microphone, shaking his head. The room went quiet. "You have a vivid imagination, my dear," he said. "These accusations? They are fantasies, misinterpretations of complex tax structures that you do not understand because you have never run anything larger than a lemonade stand." He gripped the podium, his knuckles white. "You are hurting these people," he said, gesturing to the audience. "You are driving down the stock price with your hysteria. And for what? Because you are unhappy in your marriage? Because you want attention?" He leaned into the mic. "I picked you out of obscurity," he said, his voice dropping to a growl. "I gave you a life most people dream of. And this is how you repay me? By dragging our name through the mud?" He paused. And then he said it. The word he had used at the dinner, the word he thought was his weapon. "You are trash. Lila, you were trash when my son found you. And you are trash now." He waited for the laughter. He waited for the room to side with the billionaire against the upstart. But there was no laughter. There was only a heavy, uncomfortable silence. The insult didn't land like a joke this time. Paired with the bank records on the screen, paired with the evidence of the theft, it didn't sound like witty banter. It sounded like the cruelty of a man who had lost control. Then, movement in the front row. Celeste Voss stood up. She was wearing a gray suit, impeccable as always. She looked frail, but her back was straight. She walked up the stairs to the stage. Graham looked at her, confused. "Celeste? Sit down." She ignored him. She walked to the microphone. Graham tried to block her, but she stepped around him. She looked out at the audience. "My name is Celeste Voss," she said. Her voice was shaking, but clear. "I have been a board member of this company for 20 years. She looked at Graham. He was staring at her with eyes wide with shock. "I signed the documents," she said. "The transfers to the Cayman Trust, the sale of the assets." The room gasped. "I signed them because my husband told me they were routine," she said. "I signed them because I was afraid. I signed them because in this family, we do not ask questions. We just protect the name." She took a deep breath. "But there is no name left to protect," she said. She turned to face the crowd. "I am confirming that the documents Ms. Coleman presented are real. The trust belongs to my husband. The signature on the loan guarantee, the one that implicates my son, is a forgery. I saw him practice it." Graham lunged for the microphone. "That is enough. She is sick. She doesn't know what she is saying." Security guards stepped forward, blocking him. Celeste looked at me. She gave me a small, sad nod. "I am voting my shares for the new slate," she said. "It is time for the truth." She walked off the stage. The silence that followed was absolute. Graham stood at the podium, his mouth open, his face draining of color. He had lost his shield. He had lost his witness. He had lost his wife. The voting began immediately. It was done electronically. For 20 minutes, the only sound in the room was the tapping of screens and the low murmur of lawyers conferring with their clients. I stood by the side of the stage, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked at Dane. He gave me a thumbs up. The results appeared on the main screen. Proposal 1. Removal of existing directors. For, 51.4%. Against, 48.6%. Proposal 2. Election of Harborlight slate. For, 51.4%. Against, 48.6%. We had won. By less than 2%. But in corporate law, a win by an inch is as good as a mile. The room erupted. The institutional investors were high-fiving. The loyalists looked stunned. I didn't celebrate. I walked straight to Mara Klein, draft the resolution. I said, "We are convening a board meeting right now." We commandeered a conference room behind the ballroom. The new board members, Dane Mercer, 2 industry experts I had recruited, and myself, sat around the table. Graham stormed in 5 minutes later, followed by his personal legal team. "You cannot do this," he shouted. "This vote is invalid. I am filing an injunction. I will tie this up in court for 10 years. He slammed his hands on the table. I will freeze the accounts. I will trigger the change of control clauses in the debt covenants. If you remove me, the banks will call the loans and this company will liquidate by Friday. You will be the queen of a graveyard. He was frothing, desperate, playing his final card. He thought he still held the leverage of the company's survival. I remained seated. I opened a folder in front of me. Actually, Graham, I said calmly, we have already spoken to the banks. I slid a document across the table. This is a binding commitment letter from Ironwood Credit. I said, they have agreed to refinance the entire debt load of Voss Meridian, effective immediately upon your removal. Graham stared at the document. And this, I said, sliding a second document, is the emergency liquidity plan. We have $200 million in cash hitting the operating accounts at noon today. We don't need your banks, and we don't need you. Graham looked at the papers. His hands started to shake. The leverage was gone. The threat was empty. I stood up. Graham Voss, I said. My voice was steady. It didn't tremble. By a unanimous vote of the board of directors, your employment as chief executive officer is hereby terminated for cause. For cause? He whispered. Gross misconduct. I listed self-dealing, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and embezzlement. I motioned to the security guard standing by the door. Your access to the building and all company systems has been revoked. You will be escorted from the premises immediately. Personal items will be boxed and shipped to your residence. Graham looked at me. For the first time, I saw the man behind the myth. He looked old. He looked small. You can't do this, he said weakly. I am Voss Meridian. Not anymore, I said. Now, you are just a liability. I turned to the guards. Please remove him. 2 large men in blazers stepped forward. Graham pulled his arm away from them. Straightening his jacket, he looked at the room one last time, his eyes landing on me. There was no hate left in them, only shock. He turned and walked out. When the door clicked shut, the room exhaled. Dane slumped in his chair. Mara put her head on the table. We did it, Dane said softly. I walked to the window. Below, on the street, news vans were already lining up. I saw Graham exit the hotel, surrounded by cameras. He looked like a ghost. I had won. I had bought his company. I had fired him. But as I watched him get into his car, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a heavy, somber relief. The monster was slain, but the castle was damaged. I found Ethan an hour later. He was in the executive suite on the top floor of the tower. He was standing in his father's office, now empty, looking at the view of Harbor Gate. He heard me enter, but he didn't turn around. He is gone? Ethan asked. He is gone, I said. Ethan nodded. He walked over to the desk. He picked up a framed photo that Graham had left behind. It was a picture of the two of them on a fishing trip when Ethan was 10. Graham looked heroic. Ethan looked adoring. Ethan ran his thumb over the glass. I saw him in the lobby, Ethan said. He didn't even look at me. He just walked right past me. Like I didn't exist. I walked over to him. I wanted to touch him. But I sensed a wall between us. A wall built of too many truths. He thinks I betrayed him. Ethan said, You saved him. I said, if we hadn't stopped him, he would have ended up in prison for the rest of his life. Now, maybe he can just fade away. Ethan put the photo down face down. Did you enjoy it? He asked. I frowned. What? Firing him. Ethan said. He turned to look at me. His eyes were dry, but they were full of a deep, aching hurt. Did it feel good, Lila? To win? To prove that you were smarter than him? To prove that you weren't trash? I looked at my husband. I saw the doubt in his eyes. He knew I was right. He knew his father was a criminal, but he also knew that I had planned this. I had strategized. I had kept secrets from him. I didn't do this for revenge. Ethan, I said. He looked at me, searching my face. Then why? He asked. Why did you burn down our family? I took a step closer to him. Because he was killing you, I said. Ethan flinched. He was using your name to sign fraudulent loans. I said, he was setting you up to take the fall. He was going to let you go to jail to save himself. I didn't do this to hurt him. Ethan, I reached out and took his hand. It was limp in mine. I did it to stop him. Ethan looked at our joined hands. He took a long, shaky breath. I know, he whispered. I know you did. He pulled his hand away gently. But I don't know if I can forgive you for being the one who had to hold the knife. He walked past me, toward the door. Where are you going? I asked. I don't know, he said. Somewhere quiet, somewhere where the name Voss doesn't mean anything. He stopped at the door. Congratulations. Lila, he said softly. You own the company. He walked out. I stood alone in the office. It was silent. The phone on the desk started to ring. It was the press. It was the shareholders. It was the future calling. I walked to the chair behind the massive mahogany desk. The chair Graham had sat in for 40 years. I sat down. It was uncomfortable. It was too big. I looked out at the city of Harbor Gate. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the harbor. The lights of the refinery were flickering on in the distance, the refinery that was now safe. Thanks to the money I had secured, I had saved the jobs, I had saved the pensions, I had saved my dignity. I picked up the phone. This is Lila Coleman. I said, I didn't use the name Voss. I am the CEO. Let's get to work. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been a journey through betrayal, high-stakes finance, and the cost of standing up for the truth. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. Are you in New York, London, Tokyo, or somewhere else entirely? If you enjoyed Lila's battle against the Empire, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. And finally, I want to know your thoughts in English. Do you think Lila was right to do what she did? Or was the cost to her marriage too high? Let me know in the comments. Until next time.